Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, an interview with the Pentagon's top authority for personnel and readiness issues. Hear what he has to say about the recent vaccine mandate recall, and expanded parental leave policy, and other topics. Plus, another important expansion of VA benefits, this time dealing with mental health treatments. Find out what Veterans Affairs Office has on tap. And tracking missiles from space. Current early warning technology is aging out, so how is the Space Force looking to move on? We have the details. And data management for the military. Sending secure information is a constantly evolving problem. We talked to an insider on the military's recent approach. It's those stories and more on tap this week. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Colin Demarest. First up, military headlines this week, new benefits from the VA. According to a new policy, the Department of Veterans Affairs will now provide emergency mental health care services for free, regardless of whether a veteran is already enrolled in the system. That policy took effect January 17th. According to the new program, the VA will either waive costs for care or, in cases of visits outside the VA system, provide reimbursements for emergency mental health care. Those costs can include appointment fees, transportation costs, and other related follow-up expenses. For more on that, check out our coverage on militarytimes.com. U.S. Space Force leaders are looking to maintain existing missile warning and tracking systems until new ones are fielded. The bridging strategy is to make sure the United States has systems in place while the service and lawmakers develop more permanent solutions. The fiscal 2023 Omnibus Appropriations Act adds $450 million to the service's $4.7 billion request, which funds satellites in high and low orbits that can track ballistic and hypersonic missiles, as well as their associated ground systems. The future system will likely comprise several types of satellites. The Space Development Agency is leading an effort to build a constellation of missile tracking satellites in low Earth orbit by 2026. Meanwhile, Space Systems Command is managing a separate program to develop a medium Earth orbit constellation, which is expected to have 4 satellites by 2028. The Colombian Air Force plans to buy 4 additional T-6C Texan II turboprop training aircraft from Textron Aviation in a potential deal worth more than $38 million. The country's defense ministry said it wants to buy up to 24 trainers. Colombia ordered 3 of the planes in 2020 in a contract that included the option for the country to buy up to 8 more. In 2021, it ordered an additional 4. 6 of the 7 have been delivered. They will be replacing the Cessna T-37B that the country had since 1969. Up next, part 1 of our interview with Gil Cisneros, Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. With a wide scope of personnel issues under his purview, Mr. Cisneros has a lot to cover when it comes to service members. For a look at some of his major priorities heading into 2023, he spoke to Military Times Pentagon Bureau Chief Megan Myers. Check it out.
I wanted to start with a bit of news because there has been a couple of big pieces of news around here in the past couple of weeks. The vaccine mandate was repealed yesterday. Secretary Austin put out a memo, and in there's some guidance that you are in charge of promulgating next. Do you have any details about, what are the loose ends that you're supposed to tie up there and when we might see some of that following guidance?
Well, there's still some things that we need to handle. We think we still need to put out religious guidance. As it said in the memo, the combatant commanders may have the discretion to kind of put out, depending on their AOR and what needs to be done. Different nations may require a vaccine, or it may require individuals to get the vaccine if they're going to that nation. So there's still things that we need to kind of tie up and tie up those loose ends. But the vaccine has been very positive for our force. It's kept our force safe. As the Secretary said in the memo, it's had a huge impact on keeping people out of hospitals, keeping them keeping them safe. And so we're still encouraging service members to get the vaccine, to get the boosters, because we know it works and we know it's going to keep our force safe. And part of our job of readiness is ensuring that our service members are ready to do their job and they're healthy, and that will enable them to do the job. So we're going to keep encouraging individuals to get that mandate or to get that vaccine.
In the last few weeks of the last year, there were some concerns coming out of the building that repealing that mandate would affect readiness in some way. What are some of the concerns now, either with currently serving service members, it's a very small number, right, who are unvaccinated, or newly assessing service members coming in and being unvaccinated? How do you plan to mitigate some of those risks?
Well, as I said, we're still going to encourage individuals to get the vaccine, to get the boosters. The science that we've seen throughout the Department of Defense has shown that it's been effective in keeping people out of hospitals and keeping them alive.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still going to encourage that. It's been effective and it's worked, and we want to let our service members know we're giving them different options of different vaccines that they can have or that they can choose to take. And so we'll continue to do that.
Another big piece of news recently is the new parental leave policy, which gave 12 weeks of bonding leave for anyone who's welcoming a new child, either partner, birthing or non-birthing. But some of the services haven't yet put out their guidance about that. Do you guys have concerns about there being some delays? For instance, the Army has not put out their guidance yet, which means that currently soldiers who are having babies maybe in the next couple of weeks are still a little up in the air about what their options are going to be. Is there any follow-up to the services to ensure that they get on that quickly?
Well, we'll work with them to help them get that guidance out. It just came out last week. It's still relatively new, but this is going to have a huge impact on family readiness. It's going to allow service members time to bond with their kids, both parents, not only if they have the birth of a child, but also if they adopt a child. And so this is great, and we're glad. I thank Jackie Spear, Representative Jackie Spear, who left Congress, for championing this. Representative Chrissy Houlihan for championing this. They were able to get it in the NDAA, and it allowed us to go and to make this change, which is really going to have a huge impact on our families and allow them to spend some good quality time with their newborn children.
So another big headline from the past year has been the recruiting crisis, or a creeping recruiting crisis, depending on which service you're talking about. Obviously, the services are in charge of that. They do their own string pulling and their own efforts. But is there anything from this DOD level, any research, any resources, any guidance that you can provide to get more at where the problem is? There are so many theories about why there is a recruiting crisis and what can be done about it. From your level, where are you guys working on it?
Well, we do the jammers, right? So we have all the data that we get, that we provide to the services as to what we're seeing with recruiting, right? And, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of reasons, right? One of the things that we're seeing is there's just a disconnect. A lot of, young people today don't have a connection with the military. Me, myself, I joined at 18. My dad was a veteran. My grandfathers are veterans. I had uncles that served in the Army. Everybody, I knew a lot of people that did. Today, young people that are 18 don't have that same connection. They may not know somebody who served in the military. The thing that we got to get out there, and this is what we need to work with Congress, and I know I can work with them, and I'm hoping to do this, is we got to get out there and share our story and talk about the benefits of service. And that's what I think we can do at the OSD level, is really, I'll talk about myself. All my education is through the military. I got my bachelor's and 2 master's degrees, going through ROTC, tuition assistance, and then using my GI Bill later on. There are great benefits of that. It changed my life. It put in a different trajectory than I could have imagined. I never would have imagined for myself. And we have a lot of stories like that. We need to talk about that. We need our veterans to go out and share their stories with young people and talk about the benefits of service and how it changed their life and what good it could do for them and how it could give them an education and kind of teach them discipline. And so that's what we need to do at the OSD level, and that's what we're talking about, and really kind of using the data that we have to go out there and share these stories.
Is there any thought to changing the way that accession standards are written to allow for the fact that not only when you're talking about maybe substances, but when you're talking about behavioral health, to make it easier for people who've had problems, sought out treatment, learned coping mechanisms, and hopefully come out better, to still be able to come into the military the way that people who've never confronted their issues are able to come in?
No, we took a look at that and we did make a change. There were over 35 categories of things that people were automatically disqualified for that, and I'll use one example like childhood asthma.
Right.
You
Or
know,
something like eczema.
Right.
Right.
If a person hasn't had, child or had any experience of asthma within a certain period of time, then okay, we can overlook that, right? Then that doesn't become a thing where now you need to go and get a waiver for this. We're continually looking at that and working with the Surgeon Generals and the services to see how we can expand that more. And these constantly items where people are always seeking waivers for medical reasons that maybe we don't need a waiver for that, right? Because it seems like we're granting a waiver for it all the time anyway. So why do we make it a disqualifying situation when people are coming in? So yeah, we're continually looking at that to see how we can improve the process. The Army's got a great program right now where they're working with individuals who may not meet the standards for service to come into the Army, whether it might be they need academic support or they need physical fitness support. Over 90% of the individuals have gone through that program, have moved on to go into boot camp. And so I think the other service are looking at that as well to see how they can kind of maybe take some ideas from that and kind of put it into their own program. But, we are looking at new ways and new things that we can do to help, people that want to serve.
When we come back, more from our conversation with the Undersecretary. And later, a look at the future of data management in the military. Stay with us. Welcome back. And more from our recent conversation with the Defense Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness, we learn about increases to troops' basic needs allowances. That and other topics are in part 2 of our interview.
And on some of the family assistance programs, 2 of the big ones that were designed to help service members and their families were an increase in housing allowances in places where rents had gone up tremendously, and a basic needs allowance for families who were struggling with food insecurity. That was basically the impetus for it. When they first came out, though, it seemed like there was a little bit of a narrow scope on those things. The places where BAH was going up were places like in Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, or Maui in Hawaii, places that are not exactly forced concentration areas. Is there any thought to maybe widening the aperture there so that troops who are in San Diego or troops who are in Florida, or even maybe parts of Texas where the housing prices are going up might be able to benefit from those increases?
Well, BHA went up, and at the end of the year we were able to increase it in 28 housing areas. San Diego was one of them, where we were able to put more money in service members' pockets to help them, take care of the rent. Working with Congress, Congress did a great job of, this year the BAH rates went up over 10%. Basic pay went up over 4%. So these are great things that they were able to do in order to put more money in service members' pockets. But we're continuing looking at BAH and kind of see how maybe we can improve that process. One of the things that's been kind of talked about is maybe we look at it like twice a year. But right now the law only allows us to increase BAH rates really at the beginning of the year. So but we're looking at what things maybe we could do on our own, and where we're going to need the legislative support and take that to Congress.
And the basic needs allowance also was meant to help out as well. That helps out more for people who live on base who are still struggling to make all of their ends meet. But it also seemed like the parameters for that, if you wanted to get a really good boost, you would need to be like an E2 with 9 members of your family. It wasn't for your E5s with 2 kids, 3 kids who may be struggling. Congress obviously late last year widened the aperture a little bit for you. But is there a thought, now that you know how many families are affected by these policies, you can crack those calculations, is there a thought to widening that aperture as well so that these benefits will filter down to a wider group of people?
I think everything's on the table for us to look at, right? I think Congress originally set that at 130% of And then they said, I think in the last NDA, it can increase up to, I think it was 200%. But, we're going to look at it. I think one of the things that we need to continue to focus on, right, is making sure that we're providing our service members with the financial education that they need in order to manage their finances and to make sure that they're doing it right and that'll enable them to put food on their table and take care of their families.
All right, Undersecretary Cisneros, thanks so much again for sitting down with me.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
When we come back, our personal finance expert is back with our latest advice on managing cash. That and more after the break. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack dives into the strategies for managing your fluid cash. Check it out.
The new year may have you thinking about new ways to manage your money. Maybe you want to save more and spend less. Hey, don't we all? It should be no surprise that the thing that helps you get there is making and sticking to a budget. Without it, you won't know where your money is going, how to keep more of it, or how to reach your goals. So grab a pen and paper or your digital worksheet and start listing your expenses like the rent or mortgage, food, utilities, all the bills you must pay monthly. Cut out the ones you don't or shouldn't be paying, like unused subscriptions or memberships. In the end, whatever's left, that's your spending money. But before you spend, carve out a portion you're comfortable with saving and add that amount to your monthly expenses. Essentially, you're paying yourself every month. Treating it like a bill helps it add up faster than you think, getting you closer to your short and long-term goals. So take charge of your financial wellness in the new year and make this one even better than the last.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, navigate over to Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com, DefenseNews.com, and my home on the internet, C4ISRnet.com. And to be the smartest Marine in the squad when it comes to news, sign up for our early bird brief for stories delivered to your inbox each weekday. It's also in audio. Check out the podcast version out now. And the social media is where you get your headlines. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. When we come back, a conversation with an Army expert on how the force is looking to improve data management for a digital-first conflict. Stay tuned. Data management is a complex and sometimes confusing issue to unravel. How do you secure and send information across the massive machine that is the Department of Defense? Army Enterprise Cloud Management Agency Acting Director Greg Judge was on hand recently to talk to us about the topic and what the military cloud landscape will look like in the coming years. I'd like to just jump right into these questions. What does the future of military cloud look like? What is it comprised of? Where do we go from 2023 on?
Yeah, that is the question, right? That all of the senior leaders in Army are facing today, right? So our secretary, let me take a step back. Our secretary, Secretary Warmoth, one of her strategic objectives really is to build a data-centric Army. So we start from there because data is really the important asset that we need in order to run the business, but also to execute warfighting efforts. So to that end, the cloud computing is that foundational capability that allows us not only to have on demand, all the abilities that are associated with the cloud, but allows us to share data across disparate platforms and disparate security domains. So the cloud is here to stay. The cloud is growing. It will be that warfighting and business platform. It's a business platform today. It is becoming more and more that warfighting platform, of tomorrow. So it will continue to grow. The Army is all in on cloud computing, and you will just see more and more capabilities delivered to the field, both from the enterprise and as well as the tactical arenas going forward.
You mentioned JWCC, Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how you or your team are coordinating with the Pentagon, because Pentagon officials have said it's not meant to override what the service is already doing. It's meant to complement or coexist. So could you maybe shed some light on that?
Yeah, so JWCC is that's a great topic. So I mean, first thing about JWCC, I do have to say this because we in the ECMA we competed our enterprise cloud service contract. I know how hard it is. So what the PMO at JWCC did was a huge lift, and I don't think everybody really appreciates what a hard job they had to actually get that contract out. So that's the first thing I want to say. But so for the JWCC, we are at the beginning stages of what that contract really is and how we will utilize that contract. So what we have said is, hey, we're absolutely in support of JWCC, and where it makes sense, we will utilize that contract. But we still have to figure out in terms, what is that contract really is? What are the terms and conditions? What are the costs? How do you actually execute task orders on that, et cetera, et cetera. So we're at the beginning stages, but what I do say is we work really closely with the PMO office over there. We know them by first name, and we'll be working with them going forward to figure out how it best suits the needs of the Army.
So you guys are in touch with them. Are the Army's cloud experts also in touch with the other services? If so, what is that dialogue like? And are you learning something maybe from the Air Force's Cloud One or Cloud One Next initiative?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you know, Cloud One was, that was before Sea Army existed, right? So yeah, they were ahead of us when we began to have. So I would say that we are absolutely engaged with them. We meet with Air Force a lot. We're meeting more and more with Navy and obviously our DOD partners. So a lot of that dialogue really is maturing. We've shared a lot of lessons learned with each other. We talk about planning more and more with our sister services. But I think what the conversations are really beginning to turn on, not necessarily lessons learned anymore, but now how do we truly I'm going to say integrate, but not really integrate our platforms so that we can actually make this thing called JADC2 actually reality, so we can share Army data with Air Force and Navy and vice versa, right? So those conversations are not only ensuing, but they really are maturing going forward. So I think you will see, I predict in the future that we will have pretty tight integration with our Navy and Air Force counterparts in their cloud infrastructures.
That's all the time we have for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.